We're here. Good morning and welcome, everybody. We have a jam-packed show today. I know last week we took the week off. We had an amazing week. We're going to fill you in all on that. But first, again, you know how we roll here. We start with an intro video, get you guys all going for today's episode. Stay tuned. Doug, how are you?
Dude, what a busy couple weeks.
It's been an insane couple weeks. And for everybody that's been following along, last week we took a 1 week hiatus because, as Doug has mentioned, it's been a pretty busy week. I was on site shooting a massive commercial production with a customer. And Doug, recently, now newly crowned Amazon bestseller, released his book, The Breakout Blueprint. So I got to give you props, Doug, for that.
Thanks, man. It was crazy. Definitely unexpected, but welcomed. It was really cool. All the support we got from past podcast guests and friends, family. It was awesome. It was a truly cool experience.
It was. And so it's kind of fitting, that we talk about these big events or these big things that we were doing last week, because it's part of the broader customer journey that we've always mentioned here on this show. And I figured it was time, because we've talked about this literally in every episode, that we start breaking down what this flight plan means for people and their businesses and their marketing and advertising campaigns, because we're getting a lot of questions about various parts of that process. And I figured, you know what, let's break the whole thing down and really kind of granular. We'll stay at a high level, but we'll get granular through each phase of the flight plan, so that way you can understand how all these things that we've done or are doing for ourselves or for customers all fit into the bigger grand scheme of things. What do you think about that, Doug?
Oh, I love it. And it's probably one of my favorite subjects because it's a timeless marketing principle.
It is. And like I said, it's, even though I've rebranded the concept, of digital flight plan, I mean, all the great marketers have been doing this process. I haven't reinvented the wheel. We've simply taken what has worked across industries and made it our own. I mean, Doug, what's probably the earliest example of this that you can probably think of to help people understand where we're coming from?
Mapping the customer journey has probably been one of the biggest secrets or tools that really effective marketers have used. I mean, the early days, grocers used to do it with coupons. They would kind of say, okay, I want this area to come visit my store. So they'd use coupons, and then they would use those to track. But my favorite version is probably one of the Marlboro campaigns with Ogilvy, where he would actually figure out where the people that he wanted to buy the product coming into Wall Street, he'd figure out where they live, and he would strategically map out the journey and have messaging along their route. So whether that was the billboards coming across the George Washington Bridge, or in the trains on the tunnel in the way to Wall Street, he would sequence the messaging so that when they got to their office, the bodega outside of the office had the product. Now, I mean, because of change, you can't really do that with cigarettes anymore. But the whole process of taking the time to map out, where are my customers today? What does that journey look like? And ultimately, how do I build the relationship to the point where they're going to transact with me again and again and again? So that's changed a lot with digital. Now we have so many more touch points with, when back in the day when that first started, they only had to worry about, originally newspapers and billboards. But then that evolved into radio and eventually TV. And now you have all the social media channels, different podcast platforms. There's just so many ways to interact. But with that, we can now be really strategic with figuring out, okay, who are we trying to talk to? Where are they? And how do we sequence this journey so that ultimately they buy from us, not our competition?
Exactly. And the fun way to break this down again, because we want to kind of keep it at a high level, but when you look at my digital flight plan that we built out for you. And if you know, again, a la my military background, I love acronyms. But when you look at it like that, it's really tactics. And I use that tactics in an acronym form, not tactics that, what's the latest hack or what's the latest buzz thing that you can do for your business. Because I think a lot of people chase those tactics. We see the platforms constantly rolling out new features. Instagram has now their reels. We've had stories, we've had video, stickers, all this great stuff that you can do within the platform, or all the latest tactics that people chase to try and capitalize on the platform and try to drive conversions that way. But those are really the wrong tactics that I think people are chasing. So what you need to think is that when you actually develop a strategy, again, you need to develop evergreen messaging and an evergreen strategy where you're not dependent on a platform or single feature or benefit of said platforms. It really comes down to, again, you owning the audience with your own tactics. And what I mean by tactics, again, in that acronym, break it down for you guys, is T, is traffic. So at the basis of all of this, you want to drive traffic, and that's traffic to, if you're at a trade show, you want to drive traffic to your booth. If it's, if it's online to your website, you're going to do emails, newsletter, ads. There's any number of things that you're going to do to drive traffic, because that is how you get eyeballs. That's why people pay for magazine ads, is to get eyeballs and attention. Doug, what do you want to add to like the whole traffic thing in there?
I think with the way it's being broken down into a simple acronym, it's something that can be applied either on the micro, like something specific to a campaign strategy, or the macro, like the bigger level. Like, are we going through the sequences in our campaign or in our entire marketing strategy to nurture it? But as you mentioned with the traffic stage, like without the people or without the attention or eyeballs on the specific asset, it's impossible for them to advance to the next step.
Yeah, which the next step is A, which is action. So some sort of action. It could be a micro action, it can be a huge action. But it's something that they're doing to, and I guess it kind of ties into the next phase, which is kind of a commitment, because you want them to take an action and actually commit to it. So for example, like this video, this vlog, this podcast that we're doing, we want you to listen to it. And ultimately, we want you to subscribe to it so you can keep coming back and learning more and more and more, and hopefully get more and more value out of it. So that's what we mean by action and commitment. Those are the parts. I think they're kind of synonymous, but it could be any type of micro action, Doug, right? Is there anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, if you think whether it's in person or online, when they get to either the trade show booth or your website, you want them to do something. It might be, hey, have a conversation with a sales rep or watch this video. But after they've done that action, there's some type of next step. And more often than not, especially if it's B2B sales or a longer sales cycle, you're looking for those micro commitments, like exchanging an email. So they might be filling out a form or giving a salesperson a card or entering a contest. It's not like, hey, we're not like this first interaction we have with somebody. It's not, hey, buy now. Like that only happens with commodity items, which are typically low priced. If it's something that requires some form of decision making and some form of trust, you need that micro commitment before they're ready to move down to the next stage.
Yeah. And the next stage would be the transaction phase. But also don't think that this process is linear. It's not always traffic, action, commit. Sometimes that customer, and this is why I think a lot of people in the aviation industry get lost with digitals, because they kind of view it linear. They're like, oh, well, they've done these things, they should be buying now. And they're tracking, only a segment of what the actual sales cycle is. For example, again, like if it's typically 14 to 18 months for a sales to close, I mean, you can't just focus in on a 2-3 month marketing campaign, because that campaign should be the recycling of traffic, action, and commitment. I mean, they're constantly building trust. They're constantly researching you. They're constantly validating you. They're constantly comparing you to your competition. And if you're not churning out content consistently and delivering that messaging to fit personalized to them what they're looking for, you're never going to build that trust and never get to that transaction phase. You'll fall short. It's you've basically stopped your sales process. You haven't continued with the sales call. You haven't tried to move them down the next step. And that's why, again, content is so important. Like this, Doug's book launch, the video shoot we did, all this is to help perpetuate that action and commitment portion. So ultimately trust and authority is built to now move people to the next step, which is the transaction phase. Doug, you want to chime in on that or add anything to that?
Yeah, the biggest thing I think most people, and one of the biggest themes that we keep coming back to, is the importance of getting away from singular campaign thinking and more looking at, I want to take my entire marketing strategy and map all of the customer journey, because you may need 7, 12, 15 touch points before somebody's ready to buy. Mm-hmm. The first interaction at a trade show, you then may follow up with an email, which leads them to a website, which then they register for a webinar. Like, you have all these nurture points so that they can keep going through the cycle until all of a sudden they raise their hand and say, okay, now I'm ready to have a buying conversation and do the transaction and close the deal. Yeah. But most people are just like, hey, that trade show didn't work, or, oh, that Facebook ads don't work, or Google ads don't work. Well, no one single tactic works anymore at all. They are all just individual elements of a broader strategy, which needs to be thought out. And that's why your flight plan works so well, because it looks at the whole spectrum of the journey and gets micro commitments to validate, yeah, you know what? I like you guys. I want to work with you. Let's take the conversation to the next level.
For sure. And certainly, again, after you close the deal, that flight plan, it doesn't just end at that when you get to that destination. That's not the end destination. What you have now is when somebody commits to a transaction, what happens after the conversion, right? What does that onboarding process look like? How are you going to validate that excitement that they get for you? And I know a lot of the aircraft manufacturers do a great job with this, because when it's delivery day, they park the aircraft in the hangar, the lights and the music, you get all the cool swag. Like, it just further emphasizes that excitement. You continue to build that excitement. Again, and there's more that you can do than just, in person. It can be an onboarding welcome video if you're doing some sort of service. It can be a tour. It can be an introduction to, who their customer service rep is. Something where it feels personal and you're getting them excited again about the validity of the transaction. And I think a lot of people, again, we probably take that part for granted, but you constantly need to keep doing that interaction, which falls in line, which the final part of tactics is customer service. The CS is the customer service, which I think everybody by and large knows to do. But again, that's the customer service where you create the long-standing kind of relationships where now people are referring you business, because we know a lot of the people we talk with say, Chris, most of our business is referral based. Well, you're obviously doing something right in the customer service section, or maybe the product did do well, but give them the ammunition now to go and recruit and bring in more people into the beginning of the tactics, with some sort of traffic and action. Maybe you're creating video testimonials. Maybe you're doing more content about how somebody's utilizing a product or service. See, it's not linear. It's actually circular. Everything is it just continually perpetuates every part of that phase, every part of that flight plan. Again, it's always constantly in motion and ingoing and dynamic. So
it's funny you mention that, because I think so many deals are lost right after the transaction, especially if it's some type of service contract where they require some type of renewal. Mm-hmm. If they aren't immediately having a very positive experience right after buying, it is hard to rebuild that loyalty or that excitement or recreate that honeymoon period.
Ooh, yeah.
But the longer you can extend that joy, the more loyal somebody's going to be. I mean, the two most expensive things in marketing are acquiring new customers and losing existing ones. But very few people pay attention or even think about, hey, my funnel no longer stops at the transaction. The most important part of my funnel is how I engage with my existing customers. And they lose that process and they forget how important that is and how to integrate them into their marketing strategy. And I'll be honest, if you want to double any business, I don't care who it is, you're more likely to figure out how to serve your customers better than you are to go get net new cold customers who don't know who you are.
Mm-hmm. And again, and then again, the funnel, it just goes inverse again. Go back to thinking about what type of traffic can you generate or content can you generate from, your existing customers that's gonna get them to share and talk about how you've affected or changed their lives, or now they're referring you more new business. But again, if you're making somebody feel really good and excited, and you continue to keep them enamored with your company and your brand, that brand loyalty at that point, I mean, your lifetime value of a customer now just exponentially goes through the roof. And we know because of COVID, like, here's the funny thing, in the past 6 months, more things have changed in your business than probably the last 16 years because of COVID. And I view 2021 is going to look more like today than it's going to look like what it did in 2019. And I think what we're seeing, Doug, is a lot of people are trying to revert back to, oh man, what was 2019? Can't wait to get back to 2019. What you fail to realize again is, and why mapping this customer journey is so important, is because that whole buyer's journey has shifted now. Again, what we are experiencing today is what people are going to expect every single day going forward. And that's an enriched online experience where, the information is accessible and easily located by them. They're not going to waste time trying to find the answers to what they need. They need to have all that stuff, quick access, easy to find, online, and delivered a seamless, integrated experience where now, again, if somebody's interacting with you online, their next logical step is, okay, when I am ready to talk to somebody, I shouldn't have to go through the process again of trying to describe everything that I'm interested in, right? You should know that already. You should pick up that conversation and go. So I just think it's very interesting that now, again, we need to look at these tactics, instead of chasing new tactics, build upon this foundation where you're mapping out that journey and you understand what people need to really fulfill their needs and their buying behaviors now and almost indefinitely. So
what I love most about simplifying this down to its most raw parts is it takes away the stigma that digital's hard or it's overly complicated. If you walk through the tactical framework and you just simply say to yourself, where are my customers? And how do I get them to come to either my store or my website? You've already covered 80% of the journey, because then it's just looking at your website or looking at your retail storefront or what your physical place looks like and say, when they get here, what do I want them to do? And after they've done that, what's the next steps that I need to have them happen to get to the point where they're buying from us? And then what do I want the buying experience to be like? If you just take the time, even just while you're driving, think through, what is my business like? What is the customer experience like? You'll start to craft the baseline of what you need to start working on. And then you can also get into more of the specifics on, okay, now I start to need to figure out, my clients are in a really expensive place to drive them. It's really costly to get them here. Then you can have the foundation to really put together a meaningful budget. You can start to put some parameters around, okay, we need to find better traffic sources. We need more organic. Then you can start to put the right strategies in the right order. You can start focusing on the right things. But without locking down even a baseline customer journey, all you're going to be doing is just burning money and hoping something works. And hope is a terrible strategy.
It's the worst kind of strategy. So if you guys want to get tactical, obviously you guys know how to reach us. Shoot us a message on DM, leave a comment. Happy to run through a very high level overview and audit. Sorry, I got tongue tied there. And help you map that out for you. Again, that's why we do this. That's why we love doing this, because we want to see businesses thrive. We want to see businesses win. And again, we're knocking on the door of 2021. Things are going to be different. How hot are you going to come out the gates? Do you want to come out stumbling, losing a competition, or do you want to come out ahead of everybody else, where people are now looking ahead to you guys as the trendsetters, the pace setters for business. So hope you guys enjoyed today's show. This was super awesome. This is always fun for us. If you have a chance, go online on Amazon, look up the Breakout Blueprint for Doug's book. It's a great booklet for helping people find their passion and their purpose. Is that what the premise is, Doug?
Yep. Find your passion, take action, and build your business.
There you go. So other than that, hope you guys have a fantastic day, and we'll see you all next week.
Take care, everybody.